prior to the interview were contractors that my team and I were happy to work with. In addition to this, as on the previous slide, I asked for an activity schedule, detailed program, and short schedule of cost components. For using these three items which were submitted at tender, I was able to run an adjusted tender total of the process, which effectively involves running a simulated compensation event to determine how contractors are likely to price them in and what their attitude to the contract value might be, i.e., may a contractor try and price events more heavily than others, such that they can increase the contract. And of course, this was done for a compensation event, which I thought was reasonable to happen. In addition to this, I ran a cash flow analysis, again using these three parameters, to check how each contractor was pricing the contract. This dotted black line over here represents the theoretical optimum spend, i.e. the S line, for mean value of the 4 tendering contractors, which are shown here for this enabling works package. Now, as you can see, contractor 2, for instance, the yellow line, fits this theoretical model quite nicely, which basically suggests that they have not been pricing a large amount of risk into the project and that their cash flow expenditure is reasonable, particularly when you compare it to contractor 4, for instance, who has got this incredibly, who's front-loaded their cash flow quite heavily. It indicates that they're likely to view the project as being quite risky. And by being able to group these two activities together, I was able to paint a pretty good preliminary image of what it would be like to work with each of the contractors, both from a collaborative perspective, but also from would I be able to meet the milestones required by the HIF grant. Finally, after this was done, I carried out an interview with my tender team, where I discussed the methods proposed by each contractor, including the proposed health and safety, and through that I was able to assess their competence. In addition to this, I discussed with them these two exercises which I'd done regarding their attitude towards the project, and following the interviews and scoring, I decided which the winning contractor should be. Once that winning contractor was selected, we started negotiating how contract data part 2 be refined to ensure that it very, very well matched contract data part 1, site works information, as well as which I was asking them to execute.
Two more minutes, Sergios, please.
Okay, thank you. So it's important to mention that this negotiation was being undertaken in late January, and unfortunately, late February, and when it came time to sign the contract, the COVID-19 shutdown happened, and consequently, I advised that TfL should not be signing the contract at this time because I didn't want them to be liable for any compensation events, which could have incurred through COVID-19. So during this presentation, I've spoken to you about the property development department within TfL and my role, the joint venture relationship which predates my time at TfL, the grant funding which was attached to the works, and the steps that I took to award the enabling works contract with the contractor. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. I hope to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Sergios. Just one question to begin with, if I may. What proportion of the total contract, of the total development, was the enabling works?
I beg your pardon. What was
in terms of value, what proportion of the total value of the development was that of the enabling works?
Well, the full suite of the enabling works was substantially larger than the amount of money which had been delegated through the grant. I appreciate that the £5.7 million compared to an estimated build cost of around 90 million is probably not fully reflective of its cost, but it was money which had to be spent to ensure the viability of the scheme was there.
Indeed, but my question being that you've obviously went into a great deal of effort and care on the due diligence side of this. Do you think it was justified in view of the relatively low proportion of the total value of the development that the enabling works represented?
I completely understand your point. I'd say that because the scheme's viability was so marginal, which was why we were able to apply for the HIF grant, it was reasonable, because without that HIF grant there, we wouldn't be able to deliver almost 600 homes, 40% of people. So I understand that perhaps that didn't require that amount of attention, but given...
Would it have been if the floor-to-ceiling heights were bigger than they should have been? Would that not have been a challenge you could have introduced earlier by saying, go back and adjust what the ceiling height, you can get more housing in? Or was this a developer to load value in development later in the project?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to blame the developer for doing it in a sneaky way, but it is a common concept for developers to come and try and put additional floor levels into a building. I did try and pressure them to reduce it, but they were adamant that they were using excuses along the lines of, oh, the structure will be quite big, the service zone is quite large, it's too early in the design process to reduce the floor-to-ceiling heights. And I appreciate that that's the case in the design process. However, here, the clear floor-to-ceiling heights without surface zones were around 3.2 meters, which, given 2.7 is deemed quite reasonable by London standards, I started getting suspicious.
Did you not have put a clause in the contract to say any later TfL would have got a share of?
They would have. However, the way TfL obtained money out of the scheme was through an initial land payment plus future benefit. So, in essence here, any benefit which would have been coming through the land would have been half if it came later, because the developer would have taken half of that.
How far through the project were these discussions being held? It seems, it's not uncommon, but it seems a little odd to me that the developer is trying this on at what appears to be quite an advanced stage in the concept development of the project.
Yeah, so for the scheme is at the point where it's just about due to be submitted for planning permission, and this whole exercise that I've discussed here is something which took a number of months. So these discussions started happening toward the end of stage 2. REBA stage 2.
Right. The planning authority being presumably the London Borough of Barnet, is it?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Were they involved at all on the client side? I was unaware. I was unaware that TfL were so active in housing rather than the sort of transport infrastructure of the London area, and I thought the housing was actually, largely with the boroughs.
Well, I mean, the boroughs, TfL's involvement in property development is quite new. The department only came about a few years ago. I don't remember the exact time, but it was less than sort of 10, 15 years ago. The involvement with the planning authority and the councils is purely from an engagement point of view and reviewing their local plans and things like that. They don't necessarily have much to do with the technical aspects, more so with the overview of what is acceptable to meet certain local plans and planning requirements.
So do they have, apart from the fees that they would gain from